The Irish landscape is a masterpiece of rolling green hills, ancient stone walls, and dramatic brooding coastlines. It's a place that feels alive with history, where every corner seems to hold a story. But what if those stories weren't just written in books or carved into monuments? What if they were carried on the wind itself? Imagine standing on a quiet, fog-shrouded field at dusk, the silence so complete you can hear your own heartbeat. Suddenly a faint sound drifts through the mist. It sounds like a distant shout, a metallic clang, or the thunder of horses' hooves. You're completely alone, yet the air crackles with an energy that feels ancient and unsettled. This is an experience reported by countless people across Ireland, from the banks of the River Boyne to the cobbled streets of Dublin. These are not just campfire tales told to spook tourists. They are deeply ingrained local legends passed down through generations. People speak of phantom gunfire echoing through valleys where battles were fought centuries ago. They describe hearing the sorrowful cries of women and the desperate shouts of soldiers long after the last combatant fell. These auditory phenomena, often called phantom sounds of war, are a fascinating and mysterious part of Ireland's cultural fabric. They force us to ask a fundamental question: can a place hold on to the memory of a traumatic event? Can the sheer emotional intensity of a battle leave a permanent scar on the environment, an echo that replays itself for those who are willing to listen? My work has taken me all over the globe, chasing legends and searching for answers to history's greatest mysteries. What I find so compelling about Ireland's secret whispers is how personal they feel. These aren't just abstract historical events, they are the lived, breathed, and violently concluded experiences of real people. When someone describes hearing the clash of swords at Clontarf or the crack of muskets at Vinegar Hill, they are connecting with a moment of profound human struggle. It's a chilling and deeply human phenomenon. Are these witnesses simply hearing tricks of the wind, or are they tuning into a frequency that science has yet to explain? The search for that answer is what makes this journey so compelling. In this exploration, we will venture into the heart of these legends. We'll walk the very ground where history was forged in blood and iron, and we'll listen for its echoes. We will delve into the historical accounts of these epic conflicts, understanding the stakes and the human cost. We'll hear from modern-day witnesses who believe they have experienced these phantom sounds firsthand. We will also examine the scientific and psychological theories that attempt to explain these occurrences, from auditory pareidolia to the concept of collective memory. This is a journey that sits at the crossroads of history, folklore, and science, a quest to decode the unexplained sounds of war. Make sure to hit that subscribe button for more content like this. To understand the whispers, you first have to understand the wars. Ireland's history is not a peaceful one. It is a long and often brutal saga of invasion, rebellion, and civil strife. This small island has been a battleground for centuries, its soil soaked with the blood of Vikings, Normans, English knights, and Irish rebels. Each conflict left behind not just castles and ruins, but also a deep and lasting trauma etched into the national psyche. The stories of these battles are not just historical records. They are the foundational myths of the nation, shaping its identity and its relationship with its neighbors to this day. These are the events that fuel the legends. The conflicts began early. The Viking invasions in the 9th and 10th centuries brought fierce raids and established settlements like Dublin. This culminated in the Battle of Clontarf in 1014, a bloody confrontation that saw the Irish High King Brian Boru defeat the Vikings but lose his own life. Then came the Anglo-Norman invasion in the 12th century, which began over 800 years of English and later British involvement in Irish affairs. This period was marked by constant warfare, as English lords sought to expand their control, and Irish chieftains fought fiercely to defend their ancestral lands. These centuries of struggle created a landscape dotted with fortifications and battle sites, each with its own story of heroism and tragedy. The early modern period saw the conflicts intensify, often framed around religion as well as politics. The Tudor conquest of the 16th century was particularly brutal, leading to widespread devastation. This was followed by the 9 Years' War and the Cromwellian conquest in the 17th century, a campaign so ruthless that its memory still evokes horror in Ireland. This era gave us the Battle of the Boyne in 1690, a pivotal clash between the Catholic King James II and the Protestant King William III. The battle's outcome secured Protestant ascendancy in Ireland for generations and remains a potent and divisive symbol even today, its legacy echoing in politics and parades. Finally, the modern era brought new forms of conflict with the rise of Irish nationalism. The 1798 rebellion, inspired by revolutions in America and France, was a bloody and ultimately failed attempt to establish an independent Irish republic. The most significant conflict of the 20th century was the 1916 Easter Rising, a rebellion in the heart of Dublin that, while militarily a failure, galvanized the movement for independence. This led directly to the Irish War of Independence and the subsequent Irish Civil War, conflicts that tore families and communities apart. Each of these wars added another layer of sorrow and violence to the land, creating a rich soil for stories of ghosts and lingering echoes to grow. Few places in Ireland are as charged with historical energy as the site of the Battle of the Boyne. On a summer day in July 1690, two kings and their massive armies clashed on the banks of this gentle river near Drogheda. It was the largest battle ever fought on Irish soil, with around 60,000 soldiers involved. The fighting was fierce, a chaotic symphony of cannon fire, musket shots, cavalry charges, and the desperate cries of men. By the end of the day, over 1,500 soldiers lay dead or dying in the fields and in the river itself. The victory for King William of Orange was decisive, securing the British throne and shaping the course of Irish history for centuries to come. Today the battlefield is a peaceful, beautifully maintained park, but local legend insists that the violence of that day never truly left. For generations, people living near the Boyne Valley have reported hearing strange sounds, particularly around the anniversary of the battle in July. One of the most common accounts is the sound of a massive army on the move. Residents and late-night travelers have described hearing the thunder of thousands of horses' hooves galloping across the fields, the rattle of wagon wheels, and the faint, indistinct shouting of commands. These sounds are said to emerge from the silence, build to a crescendo, and then fade away as if a phantom army has just passed by. One local farmer whose family has worked the land near the battlefield for over 200 years shared a story passed down from his great-grandfather. He spoke of a night in the late 19th century when his ancestor was woken by what he thought was a terrible storm. He said it sounded like thunder, but it was constant, a rumbling that shook the windows, the farmer recounted. When he looked out, the sky was clear and full of stars. The sound was coming from the fields by the river. He swore until his dying day it was the sound of the cannons from the battle, playing out all over again. This story is not unique. Similar tales are woven into the folklore of the region. Other reported sounds are even more personal and chilling. Some visitors to the site have claimed to hear the splash of bodies falling into the river, followed by faint cries for help that seem to come from the water itself. Others describe the sharp, cracking sound of musket fire echoing from the direction of Oldbridge, where the main Williamite crossing took place. These accounts are often fleeting and hard to pin down, leaving those who experience them questioning their own senses. Are these the echoes of the 1,500 souls who perished here, or is the profound history of this place simply playing tricks on the minds of those who walk its haunted ground? Unlike the ancient rural battlefields, the primary stage for the 1916 Easter Rising was the bustling center of Dublin. For 6 days, the city's grand avenues and stone buildings became a war zone. Irish rebels seized key locations, including the General Post Office on what was then Sackville Street, and declared an Irish Republic. The British response was overwhelming. Gunboats sailed up the River Liffey, and heavy artillery relentlessly shelled the rebel positions. The fighting was close quarters and brutal, resulting in the destruction of large parts of the city center and the deaths of nearly 500 people, many of them civilians caught in the crossfire. The GPO became a symbol of the Rising, a fortress, and ultimately a tomb for the dream of a swift victory. Even amidst the noise of modern Dublin, strange auditory phenomena are reported in the buildings that witnessed the fighting. The GPO itself, rebuilt after being gutted by fire, is a focus of these stories. Staff who have worked late into the night have spoken of unexplained noises. One persistent account involves the faint sound of a man groaning in pain, believed by some to be the ghost of the rebel leader James Connolly. He was severely wounded in the ankle during the fighting and had to command his forces while lying on a stretcher. Could his agony have left a psychic imprint on the very spot where he lay? An echo of suffering that still replays over a century later. Another site of intense fighting was the area around Mount Street Bridge, where a small handful of rebels held off an entire British battalion for hours, inflicting heavy casualties. Today it's a quiet, residential part of the city, yet some residents have reported hearing things that defy explanation. A woman I read about who lived in an apartment overlooking the canal claimed she was frequently woken in the early hours of the morning by the sound of frantic shouting and what sounded distinctly like rifle shots. The sounds were muffled, as if coming from a great distance, yet they seemed to emanate from the street just below her window. Each time she looked, the street was empty and silent. These urban hauntings are different from the whispers of ancient battlefields. They exist alongside the hum of traffic and the sounds of city life, making them perhaps even more jarring when they occur. At the old South Dublin Union, now St. James's Hospital, where some of the fiercest and most confusing fighting of the Rising took place, there are tales of phantom sounds as well. Nurses on night shifts have allegedly heard running footsteps in empty corridors and the distant panicked cries of men. It is as if the chaos and terror of that week in 1916 are trapped within the walls, replaying their tragic scenes when the modern world falls quiet. In the summer of 1798, Ireland was ablaze with rebellion. Inspired by the revolutionary fervor sweeping America and France, the Society of United Irishmen rose up against British rule. The epicenter of the rebellion was in County Wexford, and its bloody climax took place on Vinegar Hill. This gently sloping hill, overlooking the town of Enniscorthy, became the main encampment for thousands of rebels and their families. For weeks, it was a sprawling, chaotic camp. On the 21st of June, a British force of over 10,000 soldiers surrounded the hill and launched a devastating attack with artillery and cavalry, crushing the poorly armed rebels. The battle was a massacre, followed by horrific reprisals in the streets below. The legacy of Vinegar Hill is one of both immense bravery and profound tragedy. The hill itself is now a peaceful memorial, topped with the ruins of an old windmill that served as a rebel headquarters. But according to local lore, the peace is often broken by echoes of the past. One of the most enduring legends is the sound of a woman's heartbreaking cries, known as the keening woman. Keening is a traditional form of vocal lament for the dead in Ireland. The story goes that a woman whose husband and sons were killed in the battle wanders the hill at night, her sorrowful wail carried on the wind, a perpetual funeral for the lost rebels. Many visitors to the hill, especially those who walk its paths at twilight, have reported unsettling experiences. A local historian I spoke with, Seamus O'Brien, shared a personal account. "I was up there one evening, just as the sun was setting," he said. "The air went completely still. Then I heard it. It wasn't the wind. It was a low moaning sound, like a crowd of people in pain. It rose and fell, and I could almost make out individual shouts within the noise. My blood ran cold." It only lasted a minute, but I'll never forget it. You feel the weight of what happened here. His experience mirrors dozens of similar anecdotal reports from the area. Beyond the general din of battle, or the specific cry of the keening woman, there are other reported sounds. Some claim to hear the crackle of fires, a chilling reminder that the British Army burned the rebel camp after the battle. Others have described the faint, almost musical sound of a lone fiddle playing a lament, a sound said to come from the slopes where families waited in terror. These auditory fragments paint a haunting picture of the final, desperate hours of the rebel encampment. They are not the sounds of glorious combat but of human suffering, loss, and the brutal end of a dream for a different Ireland. When confronted with stories of phantom gunfire and ghostly cries, the scientific mind immediately searches for a logical, terrestrial explanation, and there are, many plausible theories that can account for at least some of these experiences. One of the most compelling is the idea of auditory pareidolia. This is the same phenomenon that makes us see faces in clouds or the man in the moon. Our brains are hardwired to find patterns, and that includes interpreting random or ambiguous sounds as something familiar, like human speech or a gunshot. The wind whistling through ruins or the branches of a tree could easily be misinterpreted by a mind already primed by the location's history. Another strong contender is the way sound travels over long distances, especially in rural open landscapes. In certain atmospheric conditions, such as a temperature inversion where a layer of warm air sits on top of cooler air, sound can be ducted for many miles. This means a seemingly inexplicable sound, like a distant bang or shout, could be a perfectly normal noise, like a farmer's bird scarer or a car backfiring that has simply traveled an unusually long way. The unique topography of Ireland's valleys and hills could create natural amphitheaters, amplifying and distorting distant sounds until they become unrecognizable to the listener on a quiet battlefield. There's also the power of suggestion and infrasound to consider. Infrasound is low-frequency sound below the range of normal human hearing. While we can't hear it, it can have a documented physical effect on the human body, causing feelings of unease, anxiety, and even shivers down the spine. Natural sources like wind and weather patterns can generate infrasound. A person standing on a battlefield already feeling a sense of awe or spookiness due to the location's history might experience these physical sensations from infrasound and attribute them to a paranormal presence, creating a powerful psychological feedback loop. Finally, we must consider the simple fallibility of human memory and perception. Many of these accounts are retellings of stories passed down through generations or memories of an event that happened years ago. Like a game of telephone, details can be unintentionally exaggerated or changed over time. A person visiting a historic site is already in a heightened emotional state, expecting to feel something. This anticipation can lower the threshold for what they perceive as anomalous. A rustle in the bushes, or a creak from an old structure, can easily become something more in the theater of the mind, especially when that mind is already filled with tales of ghosts and battles. A healthy dose of skepticism is crucial when investigating claims of the paranormal. From a skeptical viewpoint, the stories of Ireland's phantom sounds are fascinating pieces of folklore, not evidence of supernatural events. The skeptic doesn't necessarily call the witnesses liars. Instead, they seek to understand the psychological and environmental factors that lead people to have these experiences. The core argument is that there is no credible, verifiable evidence, no clear, unambiguous audio recording that proves these sounds are anything other than natural phenomena or psychological projections. Every claim remains anecdotal. Skeptics point to the concept of collective memory and cultural priming. An Irish person, or even a tourist, knowledgeable about Irish history, visiting a site like Vinegar Hill is not a blank slate. They arrive with a mind full of stories about the 1798 rebellion, about the brutality of the battle, and perhaps even about the legends of ghostly sounds themselves. This pre-existing knowledge creates a powerful expectation. The brain then actively seeks to confirm this expectation, a psychological bias known as confirmation bias. A gust of wind becomes the wail of the keening woman because that is the story the visitor knows and anticipates. Furthermore, skeptics argue that the lack of consistency in the reports is telling. One person hears cannons, another hears horses, and a third hears cries of pain. While believers might see this as different echoes of a chaotic event, a skeptic sees it as evidence that individuals are projecting their own internal imagery onto ambiguous environmental noise. The sounds are not specific or repeatable, which is a hallmark of objective phenomena. If a battle's sound was truly recorded in the environment, why wouldn't it play back the same way each time? Why is it only heard by certain people at certain times, often when they are alone? Finally, the skeptic would ask for extraordinary evidence for an extraordinary claim. The assertion that emotional energy can be imprinted onto a physical location and replayed as sound is a massive leap that contradicts our current understanding of physics. Before accepting such a radical idea, all more mundane explanations must be exhaustively ruled out. Has anyone set up a network of high-fidelity microphones on these battlefields around the clock for months? Have they correlated the reported phantom sounds with weather data, local human activity, and seismic readings? Until such rigorous, scientific investigation is done, the most rational conclusion is that these sounds are a product of culture, psychology, and environment, not ghosts. On the other side of the debate are the believers, those who are convinced that these sounds are genuinely paranormal. For them, scientific explanations like wind and auditory pareidolia feel inadequate to describe the clarity and emotional intensity of what they or others have experienced. They often turn to theories from the world of parapsychology, chief among them the idea of a residual haunting. This is also known as the stone tape theory. The hypothesis suggests that strong emotional events, particularly those involving trauma and violence like a battle, can somehow imprint or record themselves onto the physical environment, the stones, the soil, the very air itself. According to this theory, the phantom sounds are not the work of intelligent ghosts trying to communicate. Instead, they are like a psychic recording playing on a loop. The environment acts as the recording medium, and under certain unknown conditions, perhaps atmospheric, perhaps related to the witness's own psychic sensitivity, the recording plays back. This would explain why the sounds are often repetitive and don't seem to interact with the witnesses. The Phantom Army marching across the Boyne battlefield is simply a playback of a moment from 1690, an echo of energy that has never fully dissipated from the area. Many believers feel a powerful emotional connection to this idea. It speaks to a sense that the past is not truly gone, and that the profound sacrifices made on these fields have left an indelible mark. For someone like Ian Connolly, a Dublin-based folklorist, these stories are more than just spooky tales. To dismiss these experiences is to dismiss the enduring trauma of our history, she might argue. The land remembers. The violence inflicted upon it and its people leaves a wound, and these sounds are the memory of that wound. It's a form of ancestral memory that the land itself holds for us, reminding us of what happened here. This perspective ties the phantom sounds directly to the concept of trauma, both individual and collective. The sheer terror, pain, and adrenaline of a battle could, in this view, release a massive amount of psychic energy. This energy doesn't just vanish, it saturates the location. Therefore, hearing the cries at Vinegar Hill is not just a spooky occurrence. It is a profound act of bearing witness to the suffering that occurred there. For the believer, these sounds are a sacred and solemn reminder that history is not just a collection of facts in a book, but a living, breathing, and sometimes crying presence all around us. We have walked a path through Ireland's blood-soaked history, from the banks of the Boyne to the streets of Dublin. We have listened to the whispers of legend and the arguments of science. On one hand, we have rational explanations, the tricks of the wind, the power of suggestion, the brain's knack for finding patterns where none exist. These theories are logical, grounded in what we know about the physical world and human psychology. They provide a comfortable, neat framework for understanding why people might report hearing the echoes of long silent battles. They suggest these are stories we tell ourselves, folklore born from a history-rich landscape. On the other hand, we have the chilling consistency of the accounts themselves, stretching across different centuries and locations. We have the deeply personal testimonies of sober, rational people who are adamant that what they heard was real, distinct, and inexplicable. These witnesses speak not of vague noises but of specific sounds: the charge of cavalry, the groan of a wounded man, the lament of a grieving woman. The theory of residual energy, that a place can hold a memory of trauma, offers a framework, however speculative, for these profound experiences. It appeals to our intuition that events of such magnitude cannot simply vanish without a trace. Ultimately, the question of what these sounds are remains unanswered, and perhaps that is the point. The mystery itself is what keeps the memory of these conflicts alive. Whether you are a skeptic or a believer, you cannot stand on Vinegar Hill at dusk without feeling the weight of 1798. You cannot walk the banks of the Boyne without picturing the chaos of that fateful July day. The stories of the phantom sounds force us to engage with the past on a visceral, emotional level. They transform these historical sites from sterile tourist attractions into living memorials of human struggle. So, are these secret whispers merely folklore, the product of imagination and a windswept landscape? Or do they point to a deeper, more mysterious truth about the world we live in? Do they suggest that history is not a closed book, but a story that is still being told, its voice echoing in the places where it was written in blood? Perhaps the answer isn't as important as the act of listening. By listening to these stories, by visiting these places and opening ourselves to their past, we ensure that the men and women who fought and died there are never truly forgotten. Their whispers, real or imagined, are history's lingering voice.